out there, man, celebrating this Father's Day. I am Damo, the political plug. This is the Chop Up Show. Hope all y'all doing great. Let me make sure my volume and all of that is right. All right, everybody can hear me good. We good. If y'all in the chat, make sure y'all say what's up. Hey, Manuel Briggs is in the building. Miss Mam is in the building. Thank y'all for joining us. Or I can't help but say us. Today is Toya's rest day. So Toya will probably be in the chat, having a conversation with us, but she out there doing her thing. And I was like, it's Father's Day, you know what I mean? I want to, say what's up to the people, get in this short conversation. So make sure when y'all see Toya in the chat, make sure y'all say what's up to my phenomenal co-host, who's out just enjoying her Sunday. But with that being said, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I'm out here enjoying a little mimosa, you know what I'm saying? Got a little bit of barbecuing that I'm going to go enjoy a little bit later. But I had to come have this conversation with y'all. We have to talk about this. All right. Recently, I don't know how much y'all done heard or how much y'all been tapped in. I'm not trying to be no Debbie Downer. I want everybody to enjoy their Father's Day. But we still in this election season. And it's things that we need to understand that are extremely important. Right? And my issue, especially like with black folk, as we talk about this election, is that we are not focused on the things that matter when it comes to who we should vote for, who we shouldn't vote for, why. Right? We spend a lot of time talking about the Israel stuff, the genocide stuff, and all of that. We spend a lot of time talking about Trump's racism and all of that. But I do think there is an element of the possibility of a Trump presidency that I've spoken on before that I feel like a lot that is still ignored, right? It's like we still don't give it the legitimacy and the credibility that it need. But then when we hear stories like the story that we about to talk about, then that's when we start to see where, we have to do something about this. It's something that got to be addressed. So what I'm talking about specifically is a man in Arizona. Let's go get the article pulled up. New York Times. A man in Arizona plotted a mass shooting in Atlanta to incite a race war, officials say. All right, so today we're going to be talking about this concept of a race war. Why is it even viable? What makes it make sense? Should it be something we worried about? And who's the cause of it, right? So first, putting y'all up on game. Man plotted mass shooting in Atlanta to incite race war, officials say. The man that is being accused of trying to start this race war, Mark Adams Prato of Arizona. All right, and a lot of these criminals is real dumb because white people, white privilege, in these types of instances, when it comes to hate crimes and when it comes to racist violence, a lot of these people embrace their white privilege so much that they assume that they can just talk about criminal elements and criminal actions with anybody, and it's nothing's gonna happen to them. You feel me? So getting into the story. Mark Adams Prato hatched a what's good with the hood therapy? Miss Ma'am said, "Child, I heard this and been embarrassed because I'm from Arizona." Yeah, y'all be out there wilding. Y'all don't even Arizona don't celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I think they in Arizona it's called Peace Day or something like that. But y'all don't celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That's crazy. Emmanuel Briggs, hood therapy said, "I'm ass out in that war." I feel you. But I do have it's another kind of more humorous question that I'm gonna ask as it pertains to this, and then that's when we'll talk about what you got going on, hood therapy. Emmanuel Briggs said, "I saw that. That's why I was tooled up yesterday when I went to our Juneteenth celebration." Hey, straight up, as much as we've had issues with gun violence in black communities, with what's happening right now and the extremism and the violence that we're seeing from white supremacists, being tooled up, you know what I'm saying, it's for your own safety. You feel me? That's for your own safety because they have it. We know that they got them. So we need to, you know what I'm saying, make sure we protect it and have them and have ours on us too. Now, Mark Adams Prato hatched a plan in several discussions with two people working with the FBI who posed as racist extremists to carry out a mass shooting targeting black people and other people of color at a concert in Atlanta on May 14th and May 15th, the Justice Department said Tuesday. Now, as we've talked about on the Chop Up before, if y'all follow me at the Political Plug, I've talked about this on my platform before as well, but specifically, the FBI has said the biggest threat to domestic safety is white supremacists. Now remember, when Islam or when the Muslim people carried out the type of terrorist attacks, they was like no Sharia law. They was shutting down mosques. They was rounding up random Muslim people and just throwing them in Guantanamo. We remember 9/11 and the impact that 9/11 had on Muslim communities. And the statistics show that we seen the highest spike in hate crimes when 9/11 happened, and those were hate crimes against Muslim individuals. So we see this. So we know that the FBI has already been out actively like targeting and saying, "Hey, these crazy white racists are the biggest threat to national domestic safety." It's no longer the Islamic terrorists. It's not the immigrants that they're trying to scare y'all about coming from Mexico. It's not the fact that the border is wide open. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is letting y'all know. This is the same FBI that dismantled the Black Panthers. This is the same FBI that infiltrated the Nation of Islam, set up Malcolm X, and had him killed. Right. So. It ain't like the FBI has been fans of black people. It's not like the FBI has operated in a way to where they've been protective of black people, any of that type of shit. All it is that even the FBI is recognizing that the most violent people that are carrying out domestic terrorism is white nationalists, white supremacists, right-wing extremists. And we're gonna talk about some of them statistics in a little bit. So once they started to recognize that, hey, these white supremacists was wild, this is where you start to see the type of surveillance that got Mark Adams Prado caught up. Now, Mr. Prado intended for the shooting to incite a race war before the presidential election, prosecutors said in a news release. I wonder why it needed to be executed before the presidential election. We'll talk about it. Y'all see Trump in the thumbnail? We're going to talk about it. Mr. Prado, 58, was reported to the authorities last year by an acquaintance who said he had made concerning comments calling for mass shootings targeting black people and others, according to officials. Whoever that acquaintance was, you the real MVP. You save lives. Straight up. By recognizing this nigga is crazy and reporting this nigga to the proper authorities, you the real MVP. We appreciate that. Let's continue with the story, get some more details. And what's crazy is, look at this. He only faced a maximum of 15-year prison sentence. Oh, for each firearm, trafficking, transfer charge, and a maximum of 10-year sentence for the unregistered firearm charge. But what about, like, conspiracy to commit a hate crime? What about that? But anywho, officials were tipped off by Mr. Prado in October by a man who had known and frequently chatted with him at gun shows, according to an affidavit filed in the court. The man told the authorities that Mr. Prado began making alarming comments, including advocating for a mass shooting and specifically targeting blacks, Jews, or Muslims, the affidavit said. The indictment said that beginning in January at several gun shows around Arizona, Mr. Prado discussed mass shooting plans with an undercover agent and the man who had reported him, now working as an informant. So you have FBI agents that's posing as white racists, that's willing to carry out these attacks. This man is actively recruiting at gun shows. If we know that this is something that's happening at this specific gun show, we can be guaranteed that it's happening in gun shows across the country. Let's see. Mr. Prado suggested they leave behind Confederate flags at the attack site and shout things like Black Lives Don't Matter, White Lives Matter, to make clear the shooting was racially motivated. He wanted people to know that these people are being shot because they black. Or we want these people dead because they black. KJ in the building. Happy Father's Day. All the other fathers here. Shout out to him. Over the course of several gun show meetings in February, March, and April, Mr. Prado expounded on tactics and how to effectively use their weapons in the attack. So he's selling them the guns and being like, this is how if you want to shoot up a bunch of people, this is how you do it. During that time, he sold the undercover agent firearms, according to the affidavit, and confirmed that the attack would take place at a concert at State Farm Arena on May 14th through the 15th. What's crazy is that the concert, this hip hop concert that he was allegedly talking about shooting up, was a Bad Bunny concert. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see Bad Bunny as a hip hop artist. And this kind of just go to show you that just like white people is just, especially white racists, they just don't have any clue or any understanding of what's actually happening with black people. They just want them dead, right? So he wanted to shoot up a Bad Bunny concert in Atlanta. As May approached, Mr. Prado suggested pushing back the attack to June or July, emphasizing that it should be done before the election in November. He initially told investigators that he had been traveling to Florida to visit his mother. He later confessed to the authorities about the planned attack, but said that he did not intend to go forward with it. Now, what's terrifying about this is you have gun shows across the country, right? Gun conventions across the country. You able to buy and sell guns and trade guns, cash. No record of, you know what I'm saying, like that of the exchange. You have all of these white nationalists, white supremacists who are being armed to the teeth at these gun shows. And there's no coincidence that at these gun shows, you have people that are plotting the type of attacks that we talking about now. Now, what this gets us to is a broader question of what he wanted to spark was a race war. This gets us to the broader question of the concept of a race war. And let me get my notes pulled up. Now, the question that I have for y'all that I want y'all to answer in the chat is like when you hear this idea of a race war, like what comes to mind? Right? When we hear this idea of race war, what comes to mind? And the idea is that like most people think, all right, it's gonna be black people versus white people, or like it's a combination of like the white people and then people who like white people versus black people and Latinos or people that want to stand with black people and all this other shit. And I think that the way that we think about what a race war is, what it'll look like, what it'll be in 2024 is we think of like this archaic understanding of war. Like how we understand what war was on TV, and then how that shit kind of take place nowadays is completely different. War is not fought the same way. Niggas standing on opposite ends of a line and they all just shooting at each other from cover. It really don't work like that. So I think that like I know he said he wanted to incite a race war, but I think that when we think about it in the context of a war is two sides like fighting for something, right? But it's two sides that's fighting for whether it's land, whether it's resources, it's all of that type of shit. The type of violence that we see from white supremacists is not a two sides type thing. Black people are not like out there actively plotting and planning to shoot up places where it's a bunch of white folk. It ain't like niggas don't have access to guns. It ain't like niggas don't have access to the same shit these people have access to. The difference is that our focus isn't to create terror. And I think when we talk about a thing like a race war, we make it seem like it's a two sides thing, and it's not. These are white people committing acts of terror. We forget that the Ku Klux Klan was a terrorist organization. Emmanuel Briggs said warfare is more urban-based and asymmetric in the modern era. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And so like this idea that it's like, oh, it's a bunch of people on this side that's stocking up, and it's a bunch of people on this side that's stocking up, and like tensions are gonna cause them to clash. No, white people are waging a terrorist campaign. They're waging a terrorist campaign on black churches, black grocery stores, black communities. Right, and we also see this terrorist campaign with the police. There's no you can't create a distinction between the the racist violence that we see coming out of police departments where you got these racist gangs that's recently been called out in LA. You have all of these acts of violence because these police were scared, but it just so happens that in these instances disproportionately impact black people more than anybody else. So we're creating this idea in our head that it's gonna be this thing where it's like these two sides like are gearing up to fight each other, but it's really one side that's carrying out crazy acts of violence against the other with no retaliation. There is no retaliation. You don't have. I won't say you don't, right? Because I'm sure there are black people that are sitting around that's kind of opting into this language, but the people that are being attacked aren't the people that's like, we need to go attack white people. It's niggas at church. It's people going shopping. In this instance, it's people going to a concert. So they're not even targeting what, like, if we talking about war, they're not even targeting like the other side in terms of like military bases, or not necessarily military bases, but the militaristic aspect of the other side. They're literally targeting soft targets. They're targeting civilian targets. That makes it terrorism. That has nothing to do with war. That makes it terrorism. White people are gearing themselves up to terrorize non-whites in a way that is like we've seen it in the past, but it's starting to become even more popular. It's starting to become even more valid, and we're gonna talk more about that in just a second and where that's coming from. But the next part that I want to get into is like this question of, is a race war realistic? Like, should we be out here actually thinking that, we're going to see, white people versus black people versus Mexicans versus, and the short answer to that is no. Like, that's not the easy or I mean, it may not be an answer, because saying no to a race war doesn't mean that violence, that white supremacist violence still isn't real. Like, that's why. So we're going to call that white supremacist terrorism as opposed to a race war. You have white people that are willing to commit acts of terror on like soft targets who have nothing to do with the type of militaristic shit that they own in the first place. In terms of what a race war and whether or not that's a realistic thing, Galaxy in the building. Thank you for the Happy Father's Day. Caught the live one time, so I'm glad I was. That's why I kind of like doing shit at random times, so people we could catch folks that usually don't be able to catch us in the late night. But asking the question, do we think that a race war is possible? And the answer is no. There isn't going to be war in the streets with the different races going at each other. It's like, that's not realistic. First of all, the FBI didn't already said they're waging war against white supremacists, the people that want to start the race war. You feel me? So it's like that's not even something that is even being considered like something that's even being looked past. Like I said, we niggas don't fuck with the FBI. So if the FBI is looking at white supremacist violence and being like, that's an issue, they ain't doing it out of safety of niggas. I mean, yeah, does it benefit? Yeah, but that's not why they doing it out of the safety of. They doing it because they recognize the overall threat that white supremacists hold when it comes to American society. Now, the reason why I don't think that a race war, like just black and white people or Mexican and white people or Mexican and black people like fight, or just any group like that, just fighting in the streets like that, is because when we look at what happened with the Civil War, we have to recognize that was, you could look at that as a type of race war, even though it was white on white violence. Like the basis of it was whether or not to maintain the type of oppression that we saw with slavery. That was the basis of it. When Abraham Lincoln is saying that if he could end the war and keep the slaves, or if he could end the war and like free the slaves, if he could free some and keep some, he would do it. He came to the conclusion that the only way to end the war would be to cripple the economy by freeing enslaved Africans and then moving that way. The idea was to maintain the Union. And this is the thing about whiteness that people don't recognize. Like, the whiteness, its main goal, just like everything else, is to maintain itself. It's to maintain the society that it's building. It's to maintain the government structure that it's building. It's to maintain the hierarchy that it's building. And what whiteness is able to recognize is that when whiteness becomes the center, and this is what everybody's focusing on, like when slavery became the question of slavery became the center, not just something that just existed and operated in the background, but when the question of slavery was placed at the center, whiteness had to make a decision. It was either maintain like this current structure or change the structure to make sure we maintain whiteness, but keep whiteness as the foundation. And they was willing to get rid of slavery to maintain the system, the white society and the white government system that they had been structured and built. So when we look at old school racism, when we look at the type of racism with the people that's running around talking about that they want to start a race war, what we have to recognize is that that's not the core whiteness that runs the country, right? That's why Donald Trump only had one term, because no matter how subtly racist people are, that's not something that they want discussed. That's not something that they want talked about. Like white people don't want to hear the fact that that like they control the resources and they control this and they control that. They just want that to be. What I mean by that is the white control of resources and opportunity should just be the norm. It shouldn't be something that needs to be called into question because of what's happening in the society. Because when whiteness gets called into question, it's made visible, and that visibility makes it a easy target. So whiteness would prefer to remain in the background, not be the thing that's the loudest and the most hateful and all of that. Like, nah, we keep our control by maintaining things from the background, right? Philosopher George Yancey talks about why there's a reason why we have BET, which is Black Entertainment Television, and there's no such thing as WET, White Entertainment Television, because we assume that entertainment in and of itself is white. What generally entertains people is white, so it's just called entertainment. There's a reason why black people are called Black Americans and white people are just called Americans, because the whiteness doesn't need to be identified. The whiteness doesn't want to be identified. It just wants to be what is. So, the philosophical term is it wants to be the transcendental signifier. Whiteness is the thing that names everything else. Whiteness doesn't get named. That's why white people, don't really see themselves as a race. They just see themselves as people. Everybody else is a race to white people because they named everybody else. This type of violence gets in the way of that. This type of overt race war violence gets in the way of that, and it has the opportunity to upset the systems and structures that have been maintained. So of course the white system of government isn't going to allow this type of racism to dictate or to control anything, because it doesn't want the conflict that comes with that type of explicit racism. That's why I get when people say that liberal racism is more dangerous, because it makes us feel comfortable. Now, the right-wing extreme racism is dangerous because these people will kill you. They will blow some shit up. They will shoot your shit up. But the racism that you see from liberals is the one that makes you think everything is okay when it's not. Is the one that makes you think that they're we're your friends when they're not. Right? That's the reason why after Donald Trump, everybody was talking about we want to get things back to normal. What is normal? To us, normal is racism. The black people, normal is the white supremacist power structure. That's normal to us. They're okay with that. That's why we got Joe Biden. Not because people were so fed up with Donald Trump that they needed something new. We got Joe Biden for the simple fact that they wanted to go back to the racism that they're comfortable with. We're comfortable with Joe Biden's racism. That's why ain't nobody saying nothing about his executive order shutting down the border, which is the same thing that Donald Trump wanted to do in the first place. So all of this, remember when they was talking about kids in cages when it was Donald Trump? Kids are still in cages. Nobody's talking about it because it's the normal racism. Donald Trump racism bragged about it. Donald Trump's racism talk shit about Mexicans. Joe Biden didn't talk shit about Mexicans. He just did the same shit. He just went forth with the same policies. So I see the U.S. government having a problem with this type of white supremacy, with this type of racism, and feeling like they need to stamp it out and stop it because it'll upset the system as they have maintained it. With all the niggas that's so pro-Biden, that's because that is the racism that we're used to. That's why people are being like, nah, we can't have Trump back. We need to keep things, because you have somebody that's like, I know he's racist, but I'm more comfortable with his racism, which is also dangerous. Like, we can't forget that's dangerous as well. But we're talking about why the FBI would want to kind of step in and stop the type of white supremacist violence we're seeing, even though the FBI in and of itself is a white supremacist, a arm of the white supremacist justice system, right? The anti-black justice system. This has nothing to do with them protecting black people. It has everything to do with stopping these people from making whiteness this thing that needs to be discussed. It's stopping people from making whiteness this thing where the conversation needs to become valid, right? It becomes more pronounced. So the idea of a race war, like in functionality, I don't see it happening because whiteness would prefer to keep racism the way that they have it, as opposed to kind of going back to the old school racism that caused shit like the Civil War in the first place, right? They're always going to maintain themselves even if they have to go against other white people to do it. Whiteness will maintain itself even if it has to go against other white people to do it. Now, the question though is, should black people be concerned with this? Actually, before we get to that, a lot of people are going around asking the question, are black people prepared for a race war? I mean, and the obvious answer is no. Black people are not prepared for something like that, even though I don't think it's a possibility. Black people are not prepared for something like that because that's not our goal. Like blackness, the goal of being black and being a black nationalist or being black power or being black pride is not to kill or to suppress or to denigrate whiteness, even though that is the function of whiteness. So black people are trying to thrive and strive in a society that already hates them. We're not thinking about having to really have the type of arsenals that white people have, because that's not our focus. That's not our goal. Black nationalism, black power, any type of like pro-black stance, whatever, is only ever about maintaining, uplifting, and developing and allowing for blackness to thrive, no matter what blackness look like. We have completely opposite goals. And this is why I try to talk to people about white supremacist violence the way that I do, to let niggas know, like, listen, they are actively coming at us. So when people are like, well, I like the old school racism because I think it's more, I can tell who racist. They're not just letting you know that they racist. They're acting on it. They're carrying it out. Like what we see with this individual here is like, there are plots and plans. This ain't the only one. It's just the one that they caught. It's the one that we know about. But there are plots and plans that for these racists that y'all like because, they're more overt with their racism. Yes, they're not just trying to let you know that they racist. They're trying to act on their racism in a way that impacts the lives of black people. That's the problem. And we're not sitting back thinking like, we're like, yeah, well, if they racist, let them be racist. That ain't allowing them to be racist means that they have the mindset to carry out the types of things that racists want to carry out. White supremacy is active. White nationalism is active. It's not something that's just sitting around complaining about niggas. They're plotting to do things to niggas. They feel like they're being wiped out. We've talked about what's called the peace to my boy Blue in the building. And yeah, I want to hear more of y'all in the chat. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me know what y'all, if y'all agree, disagree. What do y'all think about the possibility of a race war and all of that type of shit? But the thing that we have to recognize more than anything is that anti-blackness is an active process. Anti-blackness and white supremacists, white nationalist racism is not a question of opinion. It's a question of philosophy and action. It's a question of philosophy and action. They think they are being wiped out. I mean, which in a way, like genetically, I mean, they are having some issues. But anybody, like you back a rat into a corner, they're going to do whatever they got to do to get out. And so while we're thinking like, yes, these white people trying to take us out, but as long as we thrive, as long as we do what we do to build ourselves up and all of this other shit, we're going to be good. While they're thinking that in order for them to be good, they have to kill us. In order for them to feel like that they are comfortable in what it is that they're doing, that in order for them to feel like they're safe in their communities, even though it's already segregated, they have to wipe us out. The great replacement theory. They think that we're trying to take their place, which makes them an active threat, not just a matter of opinion. Because if, as a people, to feel as if you're being wiped out, you're going to do something like that. In their mind, it's like, I need to do something about this. So as much as, especially when we have these conversations about Donald Trump, and how we go back and forth about, well, what is he racist? Is he this? Is he that? And we're going to get more about Trump in a second. But the thing that we have to recognize is that we've seen the actions that play out from the conversations that Trump had. We see the actions that have played out from conversations that Tucker Carlson has, that Sean Hannity has. It's not a joke. They actively want us gone. They actively feel, I mean, when you have the great replacement theory, which was considered a fringe racist theory up until Tucker Carlson is literally saying it out loud, saying the quiet part out loud on Fox News. We have a problem. That's because and we'll talk about why, but we are seeing the emboldening of white supremacy while we're watching the regression of progressivism. They're getting more active with how they feel about us, with how we should be treated, with how we should be dealt with. But the ideologies and the philosophies and the ways of thought that have been pushing us forward is now being pushed back by the same people that are supposed to represent those values. We are seeing a rise in white supremacist ideology, white nationalist ideology, and violence, while we're seeing a regression of progressive, pro-black, pro-minority, pro-multiculturalism. We're seeing a regression in all these ideas at the same time that white people is getting, you know what I'm saying, really putting the battery in their own back. Something that should be taken serious. All right, so in the question, are black people prepared to deal with it? No. Why should we understand the threat, we understand what we're dealing with, but when in a world where like we got lack, we just want we're focusing on like building ourselves and building our family and building our communities. Focusing on war ain't it. It's just not it. You know what I mean? And I know it's some people that'll be like, well, that's you know what I mean, that's short-sighted. You know what I mean? That's naive. You feel me? But that's not natural. And that warlike behavior that black people feel like we need to have is because we've been socialized by these warmongering racists. We've been socialized to buy into the type of violence that America needed in order to exist. That America needs in order to maintain its empire. We've been socialized to buy into that, to opt into that. So it's like we like in our minds, or in the minds of some of us, it's like this idea that we need to go back, but it's no. This is about building, developing, and growing blackness, black thriving. That's why we always have to tell these folks, like, black love and black pride has nothing to do with white hate. Nothing to do with it. People hate white people for a different reason. That's why I say, you know, when we talk about black, whether or not black people could be racist towards white people, it's like, it's not, when black people say that they don't like white people, it's not because of the color of their skin. It's because what they're responsible for throughout history. Like right now, there's a genocide that is taking place in Palestine, while the people that are committing the genocide are being treated as if they're the victims. While those same people who are being treated like victims, they're also committing genocide in the Congo. So this idea that, you know, we need to be prepared to wage war, that's white nationalist, imperialist thinking that black people inherently don't operate under. So that's why we not shooting up Catholic churches. That's why we not going into a Whole Foods or what's it called, a Gleason's or whatever, and shooting up they shit, because that ain't where our mind is, and it shouldn't be, right? And I feel like when we feel like we gotta think like that, that's when we're going into a regression. All right. Now, with that being said, the question is, how did we get here? How do we get here? And not just like, you know, how do we get to people? Because this is common. Like, niggas have been talking about race wars since post Reconstruction, right? Since black people have been able to kind of have their own shit. That's what the conversation has been. But I think it's something that's a bit more unique that's happening, and especially when it comes to the election, we need to pay a greater attention to what that is. And that's the Trump effect. Donald Trump is the reason why we are seeing the type of violence that we're seeing, right? Now, but actually, before we get into the Trump effect, I want us to talk about the type of extremism that's happening, right? If y'all have listened to me in the past few years, you've heard me bring up these statistics. All right, you've heard me bring up these statistics. This is from a project that was done by the Anti-Defamation League. Now, don't get it twisted. Anti-Defamation League is racist as hell too. All right, they own some imperialism shit too. But these statistics are helpful because of the truth in them, right? And it's about murder and extremism in the United States, and just getting to the part that I think is the most important is recognizing who is responsible for this type of shit. All right, now I've said it once, I'm gonna say it a million times. As long as Donald Trump is still running for president or is still a name in politics, all of the extremist related murders in 2022, a couple years ago, were committed by right-wing extremists. All of the extremist related murders that were committed in 2022 were committed by right-wing extremists. 84% of those right-wing extremists, the vast majority, were white supremacists. So that means that majority of right-wing extremists have some level of white supremacy that they associate with. The majority. So when people try to talk about, when people make it just seem like it's about like, well, nah, just being a conservative don't mean you got to be right. Yeah. The majority of them hold some level of racist perspective over people of color, specifically black people. The majority of them have some anti-black belief that they hold on to. Now the question is, what is inspiring these people? What is making them feel more comfortable to kind of express the racism that they've always felt, but as society started to shift, they felt like they couldn't be as explicit with it. Like, we act like cancel culture was a bad thing, but when we look at why people weren't as overtly racist as they were 10 years ago, it has to do with what is inspiring them to do these things. What people don't realize, like, for example, Brother Rob in the building, KJ said Tigray, Congo, North Sudan, and the Sudan too, as well as colonization throughout the continent. Facts, and we're gonna do a show also with the genocide that's happening in Sudan and the child labor and the genocide happening in the Congo. We got to break that down specifically because I think when we're talking about like what matters during an election, I think we ignore so much of like what actually matters and what's important. Is crazy because I think this right here, this conversation is an election conversation. This just doesn't have to do with the attitudes of people. It also has to do with the attitudes of the leaders that are inspiring these people. Okay, to be clear. So, all of the 22 extremist-related murders were committed by right-wing extremists. 84% of those right-wing extremists were white supremacists. So, the threat that the FBI is talking about is not unfounded. They also have the statistics. They have a report that they released that kind of broke this down. But let's not make it seem like it's this both sides thing. It's this both sides conversation. No. There is one side of this Democrat versus Republican paradigm that is willing and that has been more active and that is the right-wing extremists. That is the conservative side, whether you want to call them alt-right, whether you want to call them extremists or whatever. At their foundation is the conservative ideology that currently exists. All right? We forget that in 2012, when Barack Obama defeated Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, that this was the first time a president won an election and he didn't have the majority of the white vote. Most white people did not vote for Barack Obama. He still won the election. Republicans at that time took a step back and was like, we need to figure out what we need to do in order to address this racial question. Because that's the reason why we're losing, right? We're not tapping into any minority, into minority votes. We're not tapping into any, anybody that would be considered, more on the moderate left, you know what I'm saying, or the moderate vote. They was only going straight for conservatives, and it cost them heavily. Like Barack Obama beat the shit out of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, and didn't get the majority of the white vote, right? So they put out a report. Republicans put out a report that was like, all right, this is our come to Jesus meeting. We need to be better about issues that deal with race. We need to be better with issues that deal with gender and sex and poverty and all of that. What threw them off of that trajectory? Donald Trump. And what I mean by that is Donald Trump's birther conspiracy was the introduction of very blatant racism and xenophobia that at the time in politically correct circles didn't exist, right? Like, yeah, the reason why we even started talking about dog whistles and shit is because it was never explicit. Conservatives would just say things that were coded, but we knew they were talking about black people. We knew they were talking about Latino people. We knew that they were talking about gay people, right? So, for example, whenever they talked about family values, they were shitting on gay people. You feel me? Whenever they're talking about, you know, the morals of a community, they shitting on black people. So we knew that, like, that language existed, but it always had to be deciphered until Donald Trump started talking about Barack Obama ain't from America. After his second term. The man has already been elected president twice, and all of a sudden there's this conversation about him not being an American. The only way that becomes viable is if you not white. So the whole birther thing, the controversy that gave Donald Trump access to politics, that made him my boy brother Rob said, hint, wink, wink, make America great again. Right? Before progressive values made black people citizens. Before progressive values made it to where you can't just beat up on gay people. That they want to go back. Right? So the dog whistles really went out the window when Donald Trump was able to be explicitly racist towards Joe Biden and then become the next nominee. Not Joe Biden, excuse me, Barack Obama. And then become the next nominee. Became the biggest name in conservative politics and been the biggest name in conservative politics because of that expressed racism since 2000 and I want to say 2012, 13, right? Donald Trump has been the face of conservatism because his ability to just come out and just say the racist shit. And as much as we have this conversation about, and KJ said reading People's History by Zen does put more into perspective about the white extremist ideology is still common today. Very necessary to read and understand America. We got a book suggestion in the chat. KJ said reading People's History by Zen. If y'all want to get up on game. Now, as much as we call Trump racist and talk about what Trump is responsible for and like the shit that he says when he gets up there and has the conversations that he had, enough people was like, yeah, we don't need to just say it, right? Because like people just be like, y'all just call Trump racist just to call him racist. Y'all call everything racist and all this other shit. Nah, like it's people that didn't sat down and was like, we got to figure this shit out. And the Brookings Institute, Trump and Racism, what does the data say, kind of introduces us, allows us to start out having this conversation. So as a part of, in the article, and I think when did this come out? It came out 2019, right? So this is old. Like, data has been showing the relationship between Trump and racism. But what it says here in the article is that even more alarming, there is a clear correlation between Trump campaign events and incidents of prejudice violence. The FBI data shows that since Trump's election, there has been an anomalous spike in hate crimes, concentrated in counties where Trump won by larger margins. It was the second largest uptick in hate crimes in 25 years for which data is available, second only to the spike after September 11, 2011. We just talked about that, right? So there was a spike in hate crimes after the terrorist attack that was committed by Muslims. Now, people started doing hate crimes against Muslims, right? That's obvious. Donald Trump gets elected, and you get the second highest rise in hate crimes since 9/11, just because this man get put in office. What the fuck does that mean? Like, so everybody having this conversation about Donald Trump not being attached to racism or him not doing anything racist, he's inspiring racists. He's emboldening racists. And not just to say things that are racist, but to commit acts of anti-black or just racist violence. That is a campaign issue. We can talk about the economy. Yeah, we can talk about wages. Yeah, we can talk about, what's happening in Israel. But God damn it, this individual here, just his existence, just his name. Yeah, I think I'm playing when I say just his name. Nah, just his name invokes the type of violence that that people have dedicated their lives to trying to suppress, to trying to get rid of. Right? It says this association between Trump and hate crimes is not limited to the election itself. Another study based on data collected by the Anti-Defamation League shows that counties, and that's what we just went over, counties that hosted a Trump campaign rally in 2016 saw hate crime rates more than double compared to similar counties that did not host rallies. That's what the research says. So while y'all up there asking, well, what is Trump? Well, Trump ain't got nothing to do with the race war. Trump ain't got nothing to do with people being... Yeah, the actual data says that his existence in areas proves that wrong. So that's the article, but let's look into the actual information. Let's get into the actual study. Right? The Trump effect. An experimental investigation of the emboldening effect of racially inflammatory elite communication. All right. Now, again, screenshot this. If y'all want to read this yourself, y'all don't have to believe the shit that I say. But what they argue that in this article, we argue that exposure to racially inflammatory elite speech makes it more likely that individuals will bring prejudice to bear on judgments, socially acceptable behavior against minorities, and on the likelihood of engaging in discriminatory behavior. So what they're trying to argue is that Donald Trump, as a political elite, okay, we can see, or we feel that his rhetoric is enough for people to cast aside what we think was socially acceptable and be like, yeah, I'm because he said it, I also feel comfortable saying this racist shit. That's their hypothesis. Let's take a look at the research and see what they came up with. Let's get to the results. Let me zoom in just a little bit so y'all can see it a little bit better. Okay, that should be cool. All right. According to the study, when we look at the effects of prejudice in the other experimental conditions, the picture changes substantially. Simply priming immigration in respondents' minds is not efficient to significantly activate prejudice into shaping perceptions of acceptable behavior. So just talking about immigration isn't really the thing that makes people be like, okay, I'm cool with just saying some racist shit about Latino people, right? Just bringing up immigration doesn't elicit that. Interestingly, where we at? Interestingly, priming... Oh, move this out the way. Can I move this? All right, let me move over here a little bit. All right. Where we at? Okay. Interestingly, priming Trump with no explicit discussion of immigration or exposure to his racially inflammatory statements enhances the operation of prejudice in shaping perceptions of acceptable behavior. So using Trump, right, letting them talking about Trump first and then talking about immigration makes people be more racist towards Latinos. Mentioning Trump's name and then having a conversation about immigration makes people feel more comfortable talking shit about Latino people. Period. Just his name. However, the Trump prime condition does activate a more substantively meaningful effect of prejudice on normative indifference, as an increase in prejudice in this condition is associated with a 0.10 increase in viewing the vignette actor's behavior as neither good nor bad. This finding reinforces our concern about the mounting association between Trump and race in the minds of Americans at the time of the study. Like, Trump's name has become a primer to activate the latent racism that we find in white people. Like, I'm of the belief that we live in a white supremacist society, a racially based society, which means that as a part of our socialization, we're taught racism. We're taught the racial hierarchy. So that even for black people, racism is our default. Like, how we understand other black people, how we understand white people, how we understand Latinos, how we understand immigration. We all have a tinge of racism that came with our socialization, and we've had to work to remove ourselves from having them type of attitudes towards people. Donald Trump has set all that work back just by mentioning his name. And I think what's even more dangerous is that Trump's name works even better with people who are politically indifferent. Like the people who really don't care. Attaching Trump's name to these conversations for whatever reason kind of gives them more of an ability to care in a sense of caring about what Donald Trump is on. Like I talked about a study on the Chop Up. I think the last episode we did, I talked about, or not, maybe not the last, but the one before, but I talked about a study that showed, I think I showed the study that explained how the people who don't pay attention to politics are more likely to buy into or to opt into Trump's talking points than people who are tapped in. Like the politically indifferent, the politically the people who really don't care too much are more likely to care about what Donald Trump is saying, which is odd, because if you don't care, what gives Trump the ability to make you then to kind of start caring? And this happens. I've experienced this. I experienced this a few times where it's like niggas who don't vote, niggas who don't pay attention to politics. As soon as Trump and Biden come up, it's like, well, see, that's why Biden better or Trump better, because you don't care though, bro. You don't pay attention. You're telling me somebody is better in some shit that you don't give a fuck about, that you ain't even invested in understanding. It's like what's happening with Caitlin Clark. You got all of these people arguing that, oh, they need to treat Caitlin better. Oh, Caitlin the best in the WNBA. Oh, she's leaps and bounds above everybody else. That's why they treating her different. And then you be like, bro, do you even watch the WNBA? No, not at all. Not at all. Never watch. Ain't even since the popularity of the WNBA has increased because of Caitlin Clark, niggas still ain't turned on the game, but will get on social media and argue on behalf of Caitlin Clark on some shit that they do not care about. And that's what we get with Donald Trump. Like his language, his rhetoric is more dangerous for people who are politically indifferent than for the people that's tapped in. But at the same time, it's like they don't vote anyway, so it's not even a question of them getting him elected. It's a question of them expressing the attitudes that Donald Trump, the political attitudes that Donald Trump expressed, even though they haven't developed any political attitudes on their own. Because up until now, it was like, oh, everything's the same side. Until Donald Trump, and then it's like, oh yeah, nah, Trump is different. Like, get the fuck out of here, right? Let's continue. It's also a good little excerpt to help us understand. Where it says here, this finding is noteworthy as it indicates that most of the prejudice activating effect of Trump appears to be achieved by simply mentioning his name. Mentioning Trump's racially inflammatory statements has very little additional impact on activating the prejudice. Are y'all? When did this come out? Just so we on here, just so we understand. This came out in 2019. It's 2024. We've been able to recognize since 2019 that just saying Trump, somebody's going to end up saying something racist. Somebody's going to end up saying something racist. And you see it the most in social media. You see it the most in comment sections. You know what I mean? Just like literally just being like, I don't know if I'm going to vote for Trump. The mentioning of Trump means that somebody gonna hop in there. Matter of fact, I just go look at our last video that we did when we was like the two politicians that nobody wants, Trump and Biden, right? How did we get here? I think it's called The Great Disconnect or something like that. Go look at that comment section. It's like 30 something, because I mean we don't get a shit ton of comments, but on that video it's like 30 something comments just from Trump supporters. Because we mentioned his name. I'm sure they didn't watch. Like, the video was like an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. I know they didn't watch it and listen to a point that we said. They just saw that the conversation was about Trump and they brought their racism to the conversation. That's big. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm like a political nerd or whatever it is. Like I'm really like invested in this type of information. But as much shit as we talking about when it comes to what matters in this upcoming election, there is empirical evidence that proves that just mentioning Trump's name unlocks the latent racism in conservatives. And we just like, that's like just secondary. It don't matter what he say. We can talk about Trump's comments after the fact. But even his inflammatory comments don't take it anywhere further. Just mentioning Trump's name get them going. What the fuck are y'all out there talking about when it come to racism or when it come to Donald Trump? If it ain't this. What is the real conversation that's happening if we're not even able to recognize that this nigga has become the literal racism cheat code? You want to bypass somebody's race or somebody's like political sensibilities? You want to you want to see how people really feel and get past this idea of political correctness? Just say Trump name. That shit just go out the window. And it's not like that's like opening up for free speech. It's emboldening bigotry, emboldening hatred, emboldening bias. His name alone, that is significant. But the first thing a nigga gonna say is Joe Biden and the crime bill. A nigga jumped to Joe Biden and the crime bill, even though the data shows that Trump, just his name. What the fuck are we doing? What do we really care about? Because people being emboldened by this type of shit is how you get to this. This man was a clear conservative. The reason why he said he wanted to start the race war is because all these people from these liberal states are moving to Atlanta, and it's making Atlanta a worse place. It's making all these, he called it used to be a great conservative place to live. Now all these Democrats and all these liberals have moved to Atlanta, and now it's a worse place than what it is. And because he's mad at Democrats, now he's actually going to commit mass violence against black people. I mean, it wasn't about to be that many black people at that concert anyway, but just like people of color. There's been a lot of Latino people, and we're not going to downplay, the fact that same thing could happen to Latino people. We're not going to downplay that. But let's we've been in here for an hour already. I knew I was just gonna be up here for 45 minutes, but niggas talk too much. But let's get into the rest of the data. And then we'll start to close up shop. They said, in sum, our findings provide unprecedented causal evidence that Trump's racially inflammatory speech emboldened individuals to express their prejudice. That is a Trump effect. Let me say it again. Our findings provide unprecedented causal evidence that Trump's racially inflammatory speech emboldened individuals to express their prejudice. Our findings reveal that in a context devoid of prejudice, elite speech, right? So that means that when we're not talking about what presidents or what senators and all of them people saying, prejudiced individuals appear to suppress expressing their prejudice by actively denouncing prejudiced behavior. So without Donald Trump's rhetoric, most people are willing to suppress their hatred, right? Because we were under the impression that we were moving in a society that was becoming more progressive. However, we find that this suppression effect slowly unravels and gives way to tolerance and acceptance of prejudiced behavior following exposure to racially inflammatory speech by a prominent political elite. Donald Trump is the reason why all of these niggas sit back and justify hate speech, justify white supremacist violence, even black people, why they choose to ignore it, why they choose to look past it, especially fucking black people. Well, now let me not say especially, because it's only still a small percentage of black voters, because like the random people that talk about how much they rock with Donald Trump and all that shit, I don't pay no attention to them. If you don't vote, I don't give a fuck if you're a fan of Donald Trump. So those black people, the people who really not tapped in, the people who really don't care, people who really not paying attention, yeah, okay, they're Trump fans or whatever. But the problem is when hatred becomes acceptable in mass, because that hurts us. That hurts us. They out there passing bills for Asian hate, but their hate crime bill that they've passed, because of what's always happened to black people, has not been effective to curb the type of violence that these people are trying to carry out. And the basis of that ideology, the hatred, the bigotry that is at the foundation of how these people believe, at a time we were getting to a point where that shit was not cool. Now you got people who call out cancel culture for motherfuckers getting fired for being racist, but that's exactly what the fuck is supposed to happen. Because if you have a racist individual in your institution, that means that individual can use your institution to then carry out the racism that they believe in. The bigotry that they now find acceptable. That's why you fire people who express racist views on the internet. It ain't got shit to do with free speech. It's because I do workshops for small government. And what's important about these workshops is that I'm explaining that y'all work in government. When you play out your bias in your work at the government, that's how personal inherent bias becomes systemic violence or bias. That's when your hatred becomes the hatred that we then see in the system because it's being carried out by that individual. Niggas think that it's about people being sensitive and hurting their feelings. No, if you have racism and bias and bigotry existing in your institution, that institution then plays out that same racism by the people who are in control of it, by the people who are the face of it. Oh, but cancel culture, y'all just soft. Y'all, fuck out of here. People don't understand how this shit work, and that's why they become so okay with it. While they up there thinking outside the box. But you're really being primed by a political elite to be okay with hatred. You've been brainwashed to believe that shit is okay simply because this political figure who used to be a celebrity is making it okay for you. That's why I've always said that the issue with that we see with the existence of Donald Trump has more to do with celebrity culture and the way that we worship celebrities than it got to do with Trump being any type of a viable politician. People can't talk about the politics that are the legislative victories of Donald Trump. Most people can't tell you what Donald Trump did in office to actually, even when they say that he had a good economy, what did he do to do that? Can you name his executive orders? What in a Republican-controlled House and Senate, what bill did he get passed to actually help anybody? Not even just black people. What bill did he pass that was actually productive for America? I mean, I know what they are, but most people can't tell you that. But they can tell you how they feel about immigrants. They can tell you how they feel about black people. They can tell you how they feel about Democrats and everything else because of the hatred that we see from Donald Trump. It's one more study that I want to take a look at. It's an essay, not necessarily a study, that gets into this same conversation. This one is called "The Effect of President Trump's Election on Hate Crimes." All right. The objective of this essay is to point out how a number of critics predicted that President Trump's divisive rhetoric during the presidential campaign and his subsequent election would embolden hate crime perpetrators. This is what we're talking about. We're asking the question, how does this become possible? We're asking the question, how does this become viable? This is the answer right here. And Brother Rob said it. Brother Rob said it in the chat as well. Now, quickly, the results. President Trump's election was associated with a statistically significant surge in reported hate crimes across the United States, even when controlling for alternative explanations. Counties that voted for President Trump by the widest margins in the presidential election experienced the largest increases in reported hate crimes. All right, let's get into the data. And some of this we've already touched on, but let's get into it more specifically. Hold on. All right, where we at? I read all of that so y'all don't have to, but all of that is just kind of explaining the method. I struggle with it a little bit because I'm not that good at math. Like, that's not my strong suit. So, but I gotta understand the math in order to understand the numbers, or to even say that the numbers are even close to being correct. But regardless of the treatment of standard errors, the results from Table 1 are clear. The election from President Trump appears to have contributed to a statistically significant uptick in hate crimes. Specifically, we estimate that Trump's election contributed to approximately 0.13 additional hate crimes per county per quarter. Given that there are 3,151 counties nationwide, this means that Trump's election may have led to around 410 additional hate crimes nationally per quarter and 2,048 additional hate crimes since his electoral victory. Why is this not an election issue? Why are we not having conversations about the impact that this individual has had on America culturally? Not just the fact that he's uncouth, not just the fact that he just says wild things, but the impact on the people that he's saying these wild things about. This isn't a joke. This matters more than everything else that black people are having conversations about when it comes to Donald Trump. To put the Trump effect into perspective, Table 1 also estimates how other major events have similarly affected the number of reported hate crimes in the United States. Remember from Figure 2 that the largest apparent increase in the number of hate crimes happened immediately after the terrorist attacks on September 11th. Using the same methodology, we estimate that September 11th terrorist attacks contributed to approximately 0.25 additional hate crimes per county, roughly 2 times more than the election of President Trump. All of this to say that the apparent Trump effect is far from insignificant. If true, the Trump effect is around 33 times larger than the effect on hate crimes after terror attacks like those in Orlando, San Bernardino, right? While it does rival the spike in hate crimes after September 11th, there's no evidence to suggest that the Trump effect may have contributed statistically significant uptick in the number of hate crimes, rivaled by few other events in modern American history. The only thing that had people expressing more hate than the election of Donald Trump was 9/11. That's it. All of this violence that we are seeing, with the uptick of violence that we're seeing, the severity of the violence that we're seeing, this type of shit, this isn't like we shouldn't look at this as if this is like an offshoot, like this is just something that's like, no. We're having all of these conversations about the election, but for whatever reason, the emboldening of white supremacist terrorists is not a part of that. Is not a part of that calculation. It's not a part of the formula. It doesn't matter as much. I dare anybody watching, or I dare anybody to try to explain to me why, because Joe Biden did the crime bill, we should ignore who Donald Trump is emboldening right now. There's nobody that could justify this. There shouldn't be a black person in this country that should be willing to sit and exist under a president who is emboldening and inspiring the people that want to kill you. That's the reality we live in. This conversation actually should be less about the race war itself, and should be more about the fact that people feel more comfortable even talking about it. Having that, listen, he got caught up because he was running his mouth to FBI informant, or he was just running his mouth to anybody that'll listen. One person that was willing to listen went and told the FBI. The FBI popped up and just started talking to him, and he started talking to them about the race war. What would make him feel so comfortable just to talk to people about carrying out this type of mass scale violence? Donald Trump. Now, I can't advocate for Joe Biden. I cannot, in good conscience, say that people should vote for Joe Biden. I can't say it. Like, because, we start playing oppression Olympics when we're comparing a genocide that's happening in overseas to, and who's causing it, to what Donald Trump does to like the American psyche. But I will say that that Donald Trump makes white Americans more dangerous. He makes white Americans more dangerous, and him being reelected would actually make that even worse. If we saw the second highest. What's up, handsome? I'm about to. You just woke up from your nap.
What are you doing?
I'm talking to the people about stuff.
Isn't that your headphones?
That is my headphones. I'm almost done. I'm gonna finish up.
But I got Spider-Man headphones.
You do?
Yeah.
Well, go show mommy your Spider-Man headphones. I'm about to finish up though. Can you close the door for daddy?
Oh yes.
Thank you, buddy.
Bye, Daddy.
Bye bye, Hugh. My apologies. It's Father's Day. I'm a daddy. That's just what it is. But actually, since now my son didn't lifted up my mood. I was in my rage mode, but now my boy done got me. You know what I mean? Got me they uplifted my spirits. I'm gonna end it with this. Uh, let's not let everybody distract us, especially as black folk. Let's not let folks attempt to distract us with all of these ancillary conversations about Democrats versus Republicans, with all of these unnecessary conversations about the personalities of elected officials and the ones we like and the ones that we don't like. Let's not get distracted by the same generic ass talking points that political dialogue has had to deal with repeatedly. This is the type of shit that matters. And the fact that people who support Trump and people who choose to vote for Trump have no answer for this, they rather ignore this, and nobody holds their feet to the fire when it comes to this type of conversation, shows you that what people are dealing with is propaganda. They're not actually dealing with real issues, because if people being inspired to commit racist violence, race wars and shit like that, and the FBI didn't even pick up on it, it has picked up on it for years, how is that not? Terrorist attacks that happened for Muslims was a political issue. When we felt that Muslims were the greatest threat to our domestic safety, we passed the Patriot Act. There is no legislation, nobody talking about legislation, nobody giving a fuck about legislation with these white folk that are becoming terrorists and embracing their racism. This is what should matter. So, with that being said, as y'all can see, I got more Father's Day festivities to get into. Again, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and really to all the fathers that's taking care of y'all kids. It's like straight up. And what research shows is that more and more fathers are involved with their kids' lives. So that's like these days, and that matters. That's huge. And so I'm gonna go spend the rest of my Sunday with my family, get ready for my week. Hope y'all do the same. I appreciate y'all for joining me. Toya will be back, you know what I'm saying, after she get herself rested and everything else, and we gonna get back at it. This the Chop Up. I'm out. I'll see y'all next time.